Welcome to the Good Old Football Podcast. I am your host, Matt Edwards. It is a Tuesday late morning. Just got done listening to one Joe Burrow's press conference, the first time he's met with the media since going down with that terrible knee injury caused by his franchise's ignorance during the offseason to upgrade the offensive line. But we're moving forward. The Bengals hired a new offensive line coach last week in Frank Pollock, who everyone seems to like, and you really can't get a lot worse than Jim Turner anyway, so we're headed in the right direction. Good to hear from Joe Burrow, who says he will begin throwing in mid-February. So that's good. Plans to be ready for week one. Gives you a little bit of hope for a franchise that, is watching three other teams in the division, the only other three teams in the division, play during the weekend. It's nice to see. Speaking of which, the Cleveland Browns, with their biggest win since, let's call it the 1989 regular season, now they have a chance to top it. We're going to start there. I will also talk about the Steelers and what all they have going on, touch on Lamar, and really a big part of the reason I wanted to wait, I usually do these on Monday. I could have did this on Sunday night, but I really thought that after the Ohio State-Alabama game, that maybe by noon on Tuesday, Urban Meyer might make some news, but he has not at this point. So we'll talk about that down the road a little bit too, but of course, we have to start with the Cleveland Browns and the fact that they went into Heinz Field and got the win. And I don't hate to say I told you so, but the Browns missing the guys that had everyone in a tailspin in Cleveland was less important than which version of Ben Roethlisberger showed up. It's what I said last week. And the problem now is going to be you don't play Ben Roethlisberger. Again, you've got a bigger challenge in front of you, but the Browns saw a weakness within Pittsburgh, and surprise, surprise, it's a Hall of Fame quarterback. They took advantage of it, and great for them, great for the city of Cleveland. I have friends who never knew that they would see this moment, and they finally did. And I know it might just be a playoff win on Wild Card Weekend, but trust me, when you pour 3 hours 16 times a year into a franchise just to have them wreck you time and time again, that one win against that team in that city means a whole hell of a lot. Now, they get a chance to go on the road and play the undisputed king of the league in Patrick Mahomes. That said, no single Browns fan is going to be terribly upset, maybe a little disappointed, but not terribly upset if the Browns don't win in Kansas City on Sunday. And I really don't think they'll win. I don't think anyone thinks they win, although I'll tell you in a second why they might. Cleveland's just happy to be there. And it's a rare time. Now, they can't go into that game with the mindset of happy to be here. They can't take what Chase Claypool said and just be like, yep, he's right, we're going to get clapped. That's a whole nother issue. Pittsburgh, why can you guys never just get a receiver who knows how to act like an adult? We talk all the time about how they just reload at receiver. Yeah, but none of them can act like a grown-up in the NFL. We'll get to that on a different date. Cleveland, be happy to be there. Even if you lose by 4 touchdowns, you have really got the proverbial monkey off your back, and you are headed in the right direction. Like I said last week, that Sunday night game between the Steelers and Browns, that was a game that changes the direction both franchises go. And we see the fallout right now from Pittsburgh, which we'll get to in a minute. There are still issues. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger threw for 500 yards, but does he do that if you don't go up 28-0 in the first quarter? We'll never know. And you're going to get Denzel Ward back. So we know Patrick Mahomes, with or without Denzel Ward, is going to do some damage. But it really doesn't even matter. The Browns have won a playoff game. They got there when 2 weeks ago, a lot of people said, we're on shaky ground. You couldn't wrap it up against the Jets. You could argue the Browns played their worst 2 games of the season in week 16 and 17. I could argue that the whole coronavirus issue they dealt with leading up to Sunday night's win in Pittsburgh was actually a positive. Because when that happens, they get to hear, well, they don't have their Coach of the Year candidate. They don't have their Pro Bowl cornerback. It's just going to be a formality. Pittsburgh's going to roll them. That fires guys up. I don't care what anyone says, that fires guys up. These are NFL players. At the end of the day, these are still the best players in the world, and it's still a team that won 11 games. I can make an argument, and I really didn't think about it until I'm saying it right now, so I can't really go either way. But the argument is definitely there to be made that Pittsburgh, now look, let's hope none of these guys have some of the long-term health risks that we've heard of, but Cleveland, you could make the argument that them having some COVID issues helped a little bit. Guys had to dial in a little more. Now, on to Kansas City, the defending Super Bowl champion Chiefs, who went 15-1 this year. Is there a formula the Browns can use to pull off the upset, probably of this century? Has there been a greater upset in the NFL than if the Cleveland Browns went in and knocked off the heir apparent to Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes? I think they can do it. I really do, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. One, the Browns can run the ball. Keep Patrick Mahomes off the field and hope you have the opportunity late to make a couple plays, keep it close, and hope that you can get in there and make a play. I also think the Browns could play their very best and still lose. But there's this idea out there that the Kansas City Chiefs are untouchable, and that's simply not true. Listen to this. They have not won a game by multiple scores since November 1st. Who did they play that day? The New York Jets. Not a good team. I mean, Week 16 at home, they only beat Atlanta by a field goal. They beat Miami by 6. They beat Denver by 6. Denver and Atlanta, not very good teams. Again, I should have kept the schedule pulled up here. They have not won a game by more than a touchdown since November 1st against the New York Jets. Of course, they murdered the Jets. There for a while, everyone murdered the Jets. The Jets kind of got it together there at the end. But the Chiefs here, I've got it pulled up. Their last few games, obviously Week 17, they lose to the Chargers, but Mahomes and everyone set. Before that, they beat the Falcons by a field goal. They beat the very good Saints by a field goal. They beat the Dolphins in Miami by 6. They beat Denver at home by 6. They beat the Bucs by 3. They beat the Raiders by 4. I mean, and they're all, are the Browns any worse than really, obviously they're not as good as probably New Orleans or Tampa Bay, but there's no reason to think the Browns can't hang around in this game and give themselves a shot. And look, the Chiefs always find a way, and they will absolutely turn things up a notch in the playoffs, but there's this narrative out there that the Chiefs are this juggernaut, and I think it's a little overplayed at times. Yes, they went 15-1. Yes, they have all the makings of a team that's going to win 3 Super Bowls over the next 5 or 6 years. But keep in mind, in the Super Bowl last year, if Jimmy Garoppolo puts that ball on the money to Emmanuel Sanders, the Chiefs are trailing with 90 seconds left in the game. Will they come back and win? Who knows? But if Garoppolo puts that ball where a quarterback who makes as much money as he does should, the 49ers take the lead with 1:33 left. Didn't happen. And then this year, I just told you how close all their games were. And there's nothing more important, maybe, in the NFL than knowing how to close games out. Ask the Cincinnati Bengals, who this year were in just about every single game before Joe Burrow got hurt, but just could never finish the job. Kansas City is the exact opposite of the Bengals in many ways, but most importantly in the fact that when things are close down the stretch, they find a way to close. And will the Chiefs dial it up a notch? Sure. But let's get over this fact that the Browns are just going to go in there like a group of zombies and get whacked. And they might. But it's not a foregone conclusion, just like it was not a foregone conclusion last week that, the Pittsburgh Steelers were suddenly going to come alive and take it to the Cleveland Browns. Las Vegas has the Chiefs as a 10-point favorite, and that's another reason I give the Browns a shot. That seems too easy. It's like the Colts last week who burnt me, and I said it on the podcast. I said, Colts. I said the Bills -7. That's the one I bet. You can go back and listen. Bills -7 seems too easy. It scares me. But I went with it anyways, and I lost. This one, same thing. That's the thing with Vegas. If it seems obvious, they probably know something we don't. The Chiefs -10, that seems way too easy. And it makes me wonder, do they feel good about the Browns? Do they think the Browns can keep it close? Because on paper, you would think Chiefs beat the Browns by 2 touchdowns easy. In the playoffs at Arrowhead, I'm telling you, and I could be wrong, but I think the Browns, I don't think they have a shot at winning. I really don't. I do not think they'll win, but do I think they'll keep it close and cause a few heart attacks in Cleveland? Absolutely. The Browns did something Sunday night that their fans will never forget. They literally literally made Ben Roethlisberger cry. Literally made him cry at the end of the game, sitting there on the bench. Voice is cracking a little. Maybe I'm growing up. You ever see that episode of South Park where Cartman licks Scott Tenorman's tears at the Chili Con Carnival Festival? That was all of Cleveland on Sunday night. There was a part of me just for a split second that felt bad seeing a grown man sit on the bench and cry. And then my Browns fans' friends started texting me and how sweet it was for them. After all the years of Ben pummeling them, he loses one time at Heinz Field to the Browns and he cries. The question now is whether or not Ben retires. He said after the game he would first talk to God, who I feel like probably has bigger fish to fry. But if Roethlisberger's got a connection with him, so be it. We'll see what happens. And the other question, the real question to me becomes, was he hurt? Because the first 3 quarters of the season, he was still very good. Now, they played awful teams. If you go back and look at their schedule, they played bad teams. 33 touchdowns this year, 10 interceptions, 3,800 yards. That's pretty good. And yeah, it was against, the worst teams. If you go back and look, and again, they started 11-0, and we all know the story there, and finished 12-4. Of course, they go out with a whimper. But, I mean, look at the early schedule. You got the Giants to start the year, and then the Broncos and Texans. 2 of those 3 teams, I guess it'd be 1, fired their head coach. The Texans fired their head coach. The Broncos have Drew Lock at quarterback, who's a very low-end starter, if not a high-end backup. And then, of course, the Giants, who had a new head coach. Their next win, Doug Peterson's Eagles. He got fired. Then they pummel the Browns. You'll give them that one. They beat Tennessee. You give them that one, although I don't think they're as good as maybe we thought last year. They did beat Baltimore, but that's always a close game. But then you got Dallas, Cincinnati, Jacksonville. And right there you're at 10-0. And again, Ben Roethlisberger was excellent up until that game against Washington. Maybe not excellent, but definitely not, hey, let's kick him out of Pittsburgh bad. So what, did something happen? Did he break down and was unable to play again in the cold, which is still something I would worry about if I'm a Bucs fan and Tom Brady has to go to Green Bay next weekend? Because Tom Brady, a lot like Peyton Manning, it was cold weather games, you're getting older, can't put that zip on the ball you could. Is that what happened to Ben Roethlisberger? And of course, let's not leave out Mike Tomlin. He deserves very much as much ridicule, if not more, than Ben Roethlisberger. They weren't prepared. The past decade, he's been a rich man's Marvin Lewis, right? Regular season goes great. It is excellent. But that only gets you so far. Listen to this. They've been 1 and done in 4 of their last 6 playoff appearances. And 3 of those losses have come at home. And the one that was on the road happened against Tim Tebow. Come on. Mike Tomlin's had plenty of time. If there's one thing they give you in Pittsburgh, it is time. And so far, I mean, I just said it right there. Since the 2010 Super Bowl where they played against the Packers, they've simply been bad in the playoffs. There's no doubt. I think it was 2016 maybe. I don't have it up in front of me. 2016, they made it to the AFC Championship, but they beat Matt Moore's Dolphins and Alex Smith's Chiefs and then got smoked by the Patriots. At some point, you got to ask the question, because as long as you're going to keep the standard in Pittsburgh, hey, it's Super Bowl or bust, Mike Tomlin's not getting the job done. It happened once in, 2008? And he got back there against Green Bay, and that's good and great, but it's been a decade now, and to have the talent they've had there and get to an AFC championship once in the last 10 years where they got smashed in the one-and-dones, 4 one-and-dones in the last decade, including Cleveland, who was banged up, didn't have their head coach. Before that, it was Jacksonville. It was Blake Bortles going into Pittsburgh and hanging 50 on the Steelers. Happened against Tebow. I can't remember who the other one was. Oh, it was Baltimore, Joe Flacco. So what do they do from here? Who knows? I don't think Mike Tomlin's going anywhere. And he can come out and do his whole, own up to the situation thing, and that's good and fine. I don't have anything against him as a guy. But at some point, you got to wonder, if you're going to keep the standard in the Steel City what it is, he does not seem to be living up to it. Now, when he no longer has this Hall of Fame quarterback, let's see how things go. And last year, he proved that a little bit. But It's easy to patch a hole for a year. Can you do it for 3 or 4 years while you try to find your guy? So we'll see what happens. I said last year they should have went to Jameis Winston, brought him in as the backup, and had him as the heir apparent to Roethlisberger, at least see if he was the guy, because they have been terrible at drafting quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph stinks. Landry Jones stunk. Who else did they? Josh Dobbs. I mean, the only good backups they've had recently are Bruce Gradkowski and Michael Vick. So we'll see what they do. They've been bad at drafting quarterbacks. Of course, Dwayne Haskins is out there. Jameis will be out there. Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco both available. If Andy Dalton goes to Pittsburgh, I tell you what, that'll sting. That will sting. Moving on to a guy who will be around in the AFC North, presumably for quite a while, Lamar Jackson. Not sure if you heard, but he bucked the narrative. He won a playoff game. Can we stop going crazy about that? For starters, he essentially only lost last year to the Titans. His rookie year, you really can't hold that against him. He only started 7 regular season games, and he was a rookie quarterback playing against Phillip Rivers, who isn't great, but had the experience of being in the playoffs all the time. We act like Lamar Jackson was 0-7 in the playoffs. It's hard to win in the playoffs. If you listen to the show regularly, you have to learn how to win in the playoffs. It's one thing. That's another thing that's so impressive about what the Browns did. It's one thing to get there. It's another thing to know how to handle it once you're there. It's a different game. Peyton Manning started 0-3 in the playoffs, lost his first 3 games, including one where he got shut out by the Jets. So let's stop acting like Lamar Jackson was 0-9 in the playoffs. That said, Lamar Jackson acted like a big old jerk after the game. He ran straight to the locker room, and then he gets a little lippy with Lisa Salters. How are you going to be mean to Lisa Salters? And don't tell her what the story of the game was. She's a veteran journalist. That really irked me, I tell you. So good on Lamar. Won a playoff game against a dwindling Titans team. He's great, but he's great in certain aspects. He's a guy who got drafted to the right franchise. A lot like Draymond Green. You don't even know who Draymond Green is if he goes to the Sacramento Kings. Lamar, if he goes to the Jets, or name a bad franchise, the Jets, maybe, I don't know. Does he put some highlight plays together? Sure. But we knew the stat. Going into Sunday, when he was behind double digits, he had never come back. And again, he's a phenomenal runner. But with the arm, he's very average. He's not bad. He's just average. But enough with the acting. He's 24 years old. He essentially had lost 1 playoff game. I don't even count the first one. He played 7 regular season games. The Cincinnati Bengals have not won a playoff game since January 6, 1991. The Detroit Lions have not won a playoff game since January 5th, 1992. The Bills and the Browns both winning on Wild Card Weekend means that the Lions and the Bengals now have the distinct honor of being a set of jungle cats that have not won a playoff game this century. They are the only 2 franchises to not win a playoff game in the 2000s. Isn't that wonderful? Just a little nugget I wanted to drop into you. Speaking of sadness in Ohio, the Buckeyes lost to Alabama in the national championship on Monday night in the college ranks. It did cross my mind that maybe Urban Meyer was waiting for Ohio State to win or lose before he made any decision. I kind of thought about that over the weekend. He's certainly not going to want to steal their thunder. But to this point, apparently he met with the Jags owner on his boat, which is very cool. And who knows? All of a sudden, you've got an opening in Philadelphia. Maybe he would like it there. I don't know. I'd be very interested to know, does he want to coach in the NFL, or does he want to coach Trevor Lawrence in an area of the country where he left on bad terms and he can kind of regain a little bit of his status there, if not all of his status? Ungrateful people in Florida. So I think we'll know this week. Part of while I was holding out, as I said at the top, was to see if he would make a decision. It's very interesting. And another thing, the comparisons are going to come in about Nick Saban as soon as Urban makes a decision. Nick Saban was 15-17 in 2 seasons with the Dolphins. Let's not act like he was, Butch Davis. Butch Davis went to the playoffs. Bad example by me. Let's not act like he went, 4-12 and 5-11. He went 9-7 and then 6-10. In that 6-10 record, I don't know. I should have looked at it. That's another thing. I got to start doing research before the show. But he was 15-17 in 2 years. Not terrible. Let's not act like he, again, he didn't go 3-13. And it was in Miami. Not a franchise exactly known for getting it right. Although they seem to with Brian Flores. But I just hate this idea that Nick Saban was this colossal failure in the NFL. He went 9-7 in year 1. That's pretty good for anyone in year 1. Zach Taylor doesn't have 9 wins in 2 years. I went 0-1-1 in my picks last week. I will not be making any this week. I'm just kind of done with it. I'm very frustrated with myself. Had such a great start to the season, then dwindled out. I will say, I think in both NFC games, I'll take the points. I'm not going to count this toward my record for the year, unless I win. I'm not going to. But the Rams getting 7, Bucks getting 3.5. Give me the points in both those games, and we'll see what happens. I'll end on this. Do we realize, I mentioned all the reasons earlier why the Browns could have a shot. I think Baltimore is, boy, that's a tough one. It's really tough because you don't know how good they actually are. Again, the end of the season, they didn't play anyone. Now, they go in and beat Tennessee, but if they beat Buffalo and Cleveland pulls off the biggest upset of all time, can you imagine the Browns going to Baltimore, the city that stole their team, and playing for the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl? They would have to shut Northeast Ohio down. No one would be able to focus on daily life. And then if Baltimore won, bad things would happen. Bad things would happen. All right, hopefully some good things happen to you and yours this week. Thank you for tuning in. It's the Good Old Football Podcast. If you like this episode, tell a friend, text it to them, be their friend, be nice things, and do things like that. All right, I'm Matt Edwards. I'm at Twitter on Matt Edwards. Had some fire tweets during that national championship game, by the way. It's the Good Old Football Podcast. We will see you back here again next week.